Hello, good evening, and I call the June 27th, 2023 City Council regular meeting to order. For the record, we have been recessed from our executive session, and we will reconvene to our executive session at the conclusion of tonight's regular council meeting. City Clerk Ben Lane, please conduct the roll call.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor David Ortega.
Present.
Vice Mayor Kathy Littlefield.
Present.
Council members Tammy Caputi.
Here.
Tom Durham.
Here.
Barry Graham.
Here.
Betty Janik.
Here.
And Solange Whitehead.
Here.
City Manager Tim Thompson.
Here.
City Attorney Sherry Scott.
Here.
City Treasurer Sonia Andrews.
Here.
Acting City Auditor Leigh Clough.
Here.
And the clerk is present. Thank you, Mayor.
Well, excellent. We have Scottsdale Police Sergeant Sean Ryan, as well as Detective Dustin Patrick, and also a firefighter, Damon Valencia. If anyone needs assistance, I will also point out the restrooms are at that level through that far opening to the left. No one's allowed past the flags here. Let's begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I do want to call our attention to the war in Ukraine, acknowledge the brave people, sacrifice, and their fight for freedom and democracy is ongoing. I ask you to join me as we pause in silence for the people of Ukraine. Thank you. Well, this Tuesday is the 4th of July, and we have a big event happening at Westworld from 5 to 9 p.m. There will be live entertainment and, of course, a spectacular fireworks show. So we do wish, on behalf of the council, that everyone has a safe holiday and enjoy celebrating America. Our next announcement is that during tonight's meeting, the council may make a motion to recess into executive session to obtain legal advice on any applicable item on the agenda. If authorized by the council, the executive session will be held immediately and will not be open to the public. The public meeting will resume following the executive session. Also, to clarify, per our council rules of procedure, citizens attending city council meetings shall observe the same rules of order and decorum applicable to members of the council and city staff. Unauthorized remarks or demonstrations from the audience, such as applause, stamping of feet, whistles, boos, yells, and/or other demonstrations shall not be permitted. Violation of these rules could result in removal from the meeting by security staff. It also makes our time more efficient, so we appreciate that. Next, we will go to public comment. Public comment is reserved for Scottsdale citizens, business owners, and/or property owners to comment on non-agendized items that are within the council's jurisdiction. Advocacy for or against a candidate or a ballot measure during the council meeting is not allowed pursuant to state law and is therefore not deemed to be within the council's jurisdiction. No official council action can be taken on public comment, and speakers are limited to 3 minutes to address the council. If you wish to speak on a non-agendized item, or if you wish to speak on an agendized item, you would be checking with the clerk and listing that agenda item. At this point, though, we are looking for a non-agendized public comment. I show two, Lee Caulfield, followed by Tom Frankel. So if you would please come forward, state your place of residence, and you have 3 minutes, sir. Thank you.
Hi there. My name is Lee Caulfield. I live at 7726 East Thomas Road. I just was spurred to talk basically about I saw one of the agenda items. This is adjacent to it, but isn't on it, which is just to talk about homeless and what we as a city could do. I know recently there was a major study that came out about the homeless population in California and the nation more widely, and what it found was the homeless people. They basically are some of they worked hard, and then basically it happened slowly and then all at once to them. And the study found that with something as little as $300 a month, they could have stayed at their homes. Most of them were working, and then just either because they had to take a cut or the rent was raised on them or something like that, they ended up having to stay with family or friends, and then they didn't want to be a burden on them, and then ended up on the streets, and then the much larger cost to a city that results in that. About over 40, maybe 50% of them were working even while they were living on the streets or in their cars or things like that. And I just want the city to keep that in mind when dealing with some of our most vulnerable citizens who do live here, even if they don't have a home or address that they can call. And just to also call attention to one of the speakers at the last meeting who talked about how there was a recovery center near her house, and she saw repeated violations of those people's rights and how they were being taken advantage of the people who were providing them housing. And I just would like the city to be aware of that plight and what we can do for a small amount to help those people. So, thank you.
Thank you, Lee. Next, we will go on with Tom Frankel.
Mayor Ortega, Council, Tom Frankel, 6716 East Montecito, and I'm on a consent and hopefully won't get pulled, but I did come to the last meeting and observe the circus, if you want to call it, and I have seen probably a variation of council over the last, my 35 or 36 years in Scottsdale. I've seen 16 different councils, probably, variations. I have seen, my guess would be 7 or 8 mayors, and I have seen probably 7 or 8 city managers. And some unsolicited comment, and I guess that's what public comment is for, which I rarely do. But the council as it is seated today I don't like being labeled the developer, but I might be a developer and somebody that holds things and does nice things, but still a developer. And hasn't been the easiest thing to approach to want to do something always, but, and it's a big but, the council was elected. And the council was elected, and I've seen very high growth councils that anything passed and its developers' wishes goes through. And I've seen some stringent councils where not too much happens. And I'm not really here to talk about development, but I'm talking about more the civility of what's gone on since this council has gotten elected. And I have watched a lot of supporters of this council turn on the council. Of all the people that's affected, and I don't know what a road diet is, do not even know what it is, okay? Of all the people that's affected, short of the bakery owner, I own a piece on 68th and Thomas. I live on 68th Street. I travel it 7, 8 times a day. And the dissection on whichever end you're on, for it, against it, has been repulsive, whether you're whatever. My feeling, as someone who's been here 35 years and who has lived, died, and breathed Scottsdale and loves Scottsdale, and not always in agreement with the council, but you were elected, and if I, as a citizen, feel that I can come in and somehow, some who don't live in the area have a better, and I'm not for it or against it. I really don't know anything about it, but I would take the attitude, guess what? A council was elected, there's a transportation director, and whether you're for it or against it, the deboning of people who sit up there, borderline threatening. I wouldn't want to be a councilman or a mayor. It's horrible, and I guess I appreciate that you have to do it. I would ask people that do it recreationally, it's wrong. And Mayor, last thing, I'm almost done. I watched you also get dissected over an item that maybe they should have allowed to talk or not, but it wasn't worth it. They were going to have another chance at it. And I guess I would also just ask for a lot more civility on whichever end of the issue we're on. It's not fair to people that are taking their time to study the issues and make an opinion, and who are elected to make those opinions, whether you agree or not. And I don't always agree with them. But I do respect the institution, and I'm hoping it gets better than it was and is. So thank you.
Thank you. With that, we will close public comment. Moving on, I will clarify that item number 40A was added to the agenda on June 22nd, 2023, and requires a separate vote to remain on the agenda today as presented, or it would have to be continued to a future date. Now, do I hear a motion to add this to the agenda?
Mayor, I'll motion to add agenda item A1 to tonight's agenda.
I'll second.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Please record your vote. Good. Thank you. Unanimous. We will, the agenda is amended. Next, we have the posted agenda, which is the consent agenda items 1 through 40A. Now, for the record, item number 11 on the consent agenda is the McDowell Mountain Manor abandonment, and item number 12 related to Sereno Canyon McDowell Mountain Manor replat are being continued to a date to be determined at the request of the applicant. So the applicant is entitled to request a continuance, therefore that can be granted. Additionally, item number 14 related to a construction contract for a booster pump, number 83, is being continued to July 11th, 2023, council meeting at the request of staff. Do you, so at this point, I'm just clarifying that those two items are excluded from the consent agenda, and 3 items, excuse me. And I don't need a motion for that. But do any members have another question about any other consent agenda items? Okay. Well, let me just clarify that 11 and 12 have been continued, so that's being done. And then 14 is also being continued, but that one's at the request of staff. Now, with the remaining consent agenda items, do we have any questions regarding any of those items? Go ahead, Councilman Graham.
Oh, could we hear about item 25, 31, and 40A?
Are you asking for them to be on regular agenda, or you don't? Okay. 25 and 40, continue, give me the numbers again.
Sorry. 25, 31, and 40A.
Okay. Now,
Just want to hear presentation.
Okay, and you know, for the sake of the public as well, these are posted. I could review what they are, but at this point, we'll just refer to them by number. I would also open for public comment of any of the consent agenda items. So if anyone were here for the posted items, I see that there were none, so there were no comments on the remaining items within, or any other items within the consent agenda item. So at this point, I would be open to a motion regarding the consent agenda items, noting that item 11 and 12 are being continued to a date to be determined. Item 14 was continued to July 11th per the staff. And then items number 25, 31, and
40A.
40A are excluded from the consent agenda.
So moved.
Well, I just wanted to verify, you said did Councilman Graham want a presentation, or did you want those moved to the regular agenda? I thought you said presentation.
No, regular agenda is fine, because this is going to be a presentation, a quick
Okay.
vote. And then just a quick point of order with the consent items to continue it. That's just, we're voting to continue it.
Well, that's part of the motion.
Yeah.
That we're noting that there are specific days as well as the
Okay.
approval of the
At a
consent.
date, okay.
I'll second the motion, and I'll just comment that one of the things we've been trying to do as a city council is get some middle housing. And so we do have that on the consent agenda, so I think that's item, I want to say 12. But anyway, I do second Councilwoman Janik's motion.
And the other thing I'll clarify, items on consent agenda have full disclosure. They're open files on each and every item, so they can be referenced online or in our packets. So we have a motion, a second. Any further discussion? Please record your vote. Okay. At this point, we will move to the regular agenda items. In particular, item number 25, regarding the Experience Scottsdale Destination Marketing Plan, as I understand it, and we will have a full presentation by Karen Churchard, who is director of that area. Hello, Karen.
Thank you, Mayor, council members, for the opportunity to present the Experience Scottsdale Destination Marketing Plan. Do I use the key? Our destination marketing is provided through a 5-year agreement between the city and Experience Scottsdale that was approved by City Council in June of 2022. The agreement continues to ensure that city funds are used for the program of work as presented within the destination marketing plan. The strategic business plan includes marketing, communications, tourism, convention sales. Those are the main departments of that nonprofit organization. It also includes the 23-24 performance standards, as well as their contract budget for this upcoming fiscal year. The strategic initiatives in the strategic business plan include supporting the 5-year tourism and events strategic plan that the council approved back in January of this year, pursuing sustainable tourism, expanding audiences, reaching seasonal and international markets, growing luxury partnerships, showcasing Scottsdale, of course, bringing sunshine out of home, which has to do with marketing in the different cities like Chicago and New York, and promoting our city venues. The 23-24 performance standards are determined by the Experience Scottsdale staff, along with myself and Steve Gigama. We review all the different performance measures, and it's based on the overall budget, the prior year performances of these standards, the economic and business cycles, and the capacity of their staff and the resources that they have. It's also based on providing the greatest return on investment possible for the city. We have 17 performance standards that have been developed. 5 of those are specific to City of Scottsdale. So standards that actually only count things within the city of Scottsdale. So this is actually, the title is wrong, my apologies, I didn't catch that, but are the 5 standards that are specific to Scottsdale. The number of media placements that say Scottsdale specifically, or a business within Scottsdale. And as of the 3rd quarter of this year, we haven't gotten the 4th quarter results yet. They've reached their 107% of the goal for media placements. A number of travel trade professionals, again, trained specifically about Scottsdale. The goal was 800. They've done 197% by training 1,500 through the 3rd quarter. The number of convention sales leads for City of Scottsdale hotel properties, again, over their goal at 116% through the 3rd quarter. Number of meetings booked into the actual properties, their goal was 210. They've exceeded that by 107%. And then the number of estimated room nights that the meetings actually generated, again, over budget, over their goal of 129%. The 45% of the actual total revenues that are derived from the bed tax will be paid to Experience Scottsdale. Our fiscal year 23-24 adopted operating budget forecasts bed tax to be about $31 million. The remaining 5% stays in the city through a destination marketing fund and are allocated in what we call our reserve fund. And the remaining 50% is allocated among tourism research, support for tourism-driven events, related capital projects, and other eligible uses, including our 50% agreement with the Fiesta Bowl expenditure, which is a little over $200,000. City services funding, based on the fiscal year 23-24 estimates by our treasurer, the amount of 45% would be $14,151,000, and this Fiesta Bowl pass-through I mentioned just over $200,000. So the total contract is $14,356,350, and but it's actually based on actuals and the actual amounts that we collect. This is just what the estimates are at this time. And I just showed the actuals for 21-22 and what's forecasted for the end of this fiscal year. Recently, we did a return on investment advertising research project, which is part of the new agreement. It was basically designed to really measure the ROI and the advertising awareness of the Scottsdale Spring and Winter 2022 advertising campaigns, and also provide analysis of our image, the Scottsdale image, to provide input into the development of positioning and messaging for future campaigns. I'm happy to report that the benchmark study of 1,400 respondents in 3 key markets, New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles, the campaigns produced an additional 821,000 trips to Scottsdale, with these incremental Scottsdale visitors spent almost over $200 million. And when you relate that advertising cost of $1.9 million, this translates into a return of investment of $116 in visitor spending for each dollar spent. So the incremental expenditures yielded $7.6 million in local taxes, and the return of investment on this campaign was $4 in taxes for each advertising dollar spent. Very good information, and we'll probably get you a more detailed report on that at a later date. But compared to the consumer ratings of Scottsdale and economic development, it really showed that the campaign, if you visited Scottsdale, it really gave that halo effect, meaning that Scottsdale's tourism advertising significantly improves the image of Scottsdale for a lot of our economic development objectives. And Longwoods noted that the results of this survey were a very strong indicator of an incredibly efficient campaign, and they actually noted that it's one of the best campaigns they've seen post-COVID. So the action tonight is to adopt Resolution 12-8110. I won't read all the details, but will welcome any questions, Mayor or council members.
Let me begin by just asking, could you recap how the Tourism Development Commission also monitors the work and which the Experience Scottsdale do.
Mayor and council members, thank you for that. Yes, all the details of the agreement with Experience Scottsdale is reviewed quarterly with the Tourism Development Commission, and the Destination Marketing Plan is presented to them not once but twice. The first initial review is generally in April, and that provides any questions, and then in May, it's actually recommended, and the Tourism Development Commission unanimously recommended that the council approve the Destination Marketing Plan.
Thank you. Next, we'll go with Councilwoman Janik and then Councilmember Durham.
Karen, I just wanted to say thank you. You and your staff do a phenomenal job for tourism in Scottsdale. We know how much time and effort you put into it, how much you love the city, and just thank you so much to you and your staff for all that you do for us. Thanks.
Thank you.
Councilmember Durham.
Thank you, Mayor. Did you say that you're going to make that Longwood study available to us?
Yes.
Okay, that would be great. I would like to see that. Thank you, Mayor.
Good. Councilmember Graham.
Thank you, Mayor. Karen, thanks for the presentation and coming and talking to us. Sometimes we hear about the lack of coordinated marketing effort between the city and Museum of the West and Old Town, and we've got a provision in there promoting the Old Town. And do you think those benchmarks in the contracts, would you say those are being met?
Yes, they're being met. We work with Experience Scottsdale to market Old Town, Museum of the West, and others nationally, so outside of this local area. The work that my staff and I do, particularly Jackie Contaldo, we market Old Town Scottsdale here in the metropolitan Phoenix area. So we don't want to use the same dollars twice, so we're very careful about our two different campaigns. But we work together very well, and we have meetings monthly. But yes, they are meeting the expectations that we have for Old Town Scottsdale.
Yeah, I thought about pulling 26, 27, just because it's because you administer the contracts for all three, right? Scottsdale Arts, Museum of the West, and Experience Scottsdale.
Yes.
And is there anywhere you think we could improve, or because you've heard some of the feedback we've gotten about marketing the Old Town, do you think there's any validity to that?
I think there's definitely always room for improvement, and we plan to. I've actually been talking to our Assistant City Manager, Brent Stockwell, about having a meeting soon with the new fiscal year, and we will be meeting with some of our constituents in Old Town Scottsdale as well, so that they understand the campaign that we're doing and why we do it. But we are certainly open to doing things differently and expanding that. We actually asked council for an additional $250,000, which was granted through the operating budget. So we definitely will be spending more dollars this year on Old Town Scottsdale, and Museum of the West is certainly a part of that.
Do you ever facilitate any interfacing between Museum of West and Experience Scottsdale and any of the several entities?
We do a lot of activities together at the Museum of the West. I know that they're very well. Museum of the West does talk. Actually, just had recently a fan tour with Experience Scottsdale with Todd Bankford, the new CEO of the museum that's here tonight, and we've always. Museum of the West has always been at the forefront of what we do. There's a lot of our ads that actually show photos of Museum of the West and talk about it, and I know Experience Scottsdale has had group tours through there and has done group meetings there for businesses that have come in from out of this state.
Okay. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, I see no other hands up. With that, I move to adopt resolution number 12810, authorizing the fiscal year 2023-24 strategic business plan performance standards and contract budget under the Destination Marketing Services Contract 2022-054 COS between City of Scottsdale and Scottsdale Convention and Visitors Bureau, DBA Experience Scottsdale.
Second.
So we have motion and second. I see no further discussion. Please record your vote. Thank you. Unanimous. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
Next, we will move on to item number 31, which we will have the full presentation from Judy Doyle.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. Just waiting for the presentation to come up. I was warned before the meeting, don't panic, that it will come up, so. Perhaps we should go to a commercial break.
Perhaps you should start panicking.
Yeah, right. At some point I will. I did see it pop up there for a minute. There we go. Okay, so this item was for fiscal year 22-23, operating and capital budget adjustments and a cash transfer. Pretty standard item that we have at the end of each fiscal year, where we are trying to true up our budget to any expenditures that maybe have exceeded the budgeted amount. We do break it up into some different kind of buckets, if you will. Next slide, please. So first, we do try to utilize existing budget authority for expenditures. We have a financial policy that does state that we will look for alternatives other than contingency before coming forward requesting contingency. So the first items here, again, as I said, are to utilize existing budget authority for expenditures. In our Water Resources Department, they were just looking to move budget between two of their contractual funds to address some increased personnel costs related to plant operations and unexpected maintenance costs for the installation of a granular activated carbon tank. Public Works, this was to align a grant that we had received last fiscal year for 2 sweepers. We had budgeted the sweepers in the Fleet Management Fund, but we just want to move that budget to the grant fund where those expenses are occurring. Community and Economic Development, this is actually kind of a two-parter. We have part of it here in the utilize existing budget authority for expenditures, and then we have a piece of it in use of contingency. Our bed tax collections came in significantly more than we had forecasted for the year. Therefore, we have to pay the destination marketing contract more than what we had planned. So again, looking within the current budget, within community and economic development, we were able to identify $2.5 million within the planning and development services budget in the Downtown Cultural Trust Fund. There weren't any projects or anything planned at this time. Again, this is budget authority only that we will be transferring to go ahead and pay that contract out of the tourism budget. Next slide, please. Also in our operating budget, we have use of contingency. In our public safety fire, we have been talking about this quarterly in our monthly financial update. They were seeing an increase in their overtime due to staffing shortage levels, and we also had to an unanticipated refund to the public safety retirement system because of a change in the contribution rates. The city attorney, we had a grant in the, was it the prosecutor's office? They received that grant, I think it was even last year, maybe the year before. These were just funds that had not been spent, and we were able to carry that forward, so we need the budget authority for that. Within community services, we had a number of things all within their special programs fund, so they will be funded by the revenue source. All of these are for the maximum amount. So while we are asking for $1,803,270 in fire, if maybe at the end of the day it's only $1.5 million, just an example, we will only transfer contingency of that exact amount. But within community services, we did need to increase, we saw an increase in the cost of inventory for resale at McCormick-Stillman Railroad Park. We had some unanticipated expenses associated with the library, purchases for the Hold It lockers in the summer reading program. Also, at the stadium, we had some unbudgeted expenses related to the delay in the Stadium Life Cycle Seat Replacement Program. We also want to utilize the new event parking fee revenue for expenses related to the multi-use sports fields in the area of Bell Road Park. And moving on to community and economic development, we did need some budget authority for a website-based job board for Scottsdale businesses. Again, the remaining tourism development fund, again, increased bed taxes. We had $1.2 million that we needed in contingency. The fire, as I mentioned. Next slide, please. Then on our capital budget, we do have some budget updates, if you will. We had just some small amounts that we needed to move from one project to another. We had identified savings in one project to cover the increases in the other. The booster station, the Water Resources Division is requesting a capital budget appropriation of $1 million to accommodate the Booster Station 83 project construction phase. And then in the deep well recharge recovery, we needed an additional $15 million. So they had identified funding in 2 projects, and then we're going to use contingency for another. And I do have staff here able to answer any questions specifically related to those capital projects. And then finally, community services, Westworld Parks and Recreation. This is for our continuous fleet replacement. We had some vehicles in community services, water resources, and public works that are seeing delays in receiving those vehicles. So we are asking to transfer that over to our capital budget, where that money will carry forward until we can receive those vehicles and equipment. Next slide, please. And then finally, we did have some contingency requested in our capital budget. We are asking for $650,000 for the Story Rock Development Corporation, as part of the development agreement, was required to contribute a minimum of $650,000 towards the construction of a traffic signal or a roundabout at the Alma School and Happy Valley Road intersection. And then IT, due to supply chain and lead time challenges, it was necessary to place an order earlier than projected. So we're asking for some contingency to do that. And then finally, we are asking for a cash transfer in the amount of $500,000 from the Special Event Parking Fund within our operating budget to the Westworld Parking Access Master Plan CIP project. And that concludes the presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions, or again, staff is here to answer any questions as well.
You know, at this point, even pointing out sort of the end of the year, fiscal year, checkbook, final balancing, and by our signature and our authority, we'll close out the books for this. This is the last meeting of our fiscal year. I also note one item that's somewhat related is the true-up for Experience Scottsdale. You know, we had a Super Bowl season and tremendous numbers, but we also had a larger than expected, the 5% hold that we had from the city is also a result of some higher bed tax revenue. With that, I'm open to a motion. Are there any other questions? Okay?
No,
Then,
I was just going to make a motion to approve.
sure, please, recognize you.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to hear the presentation. I appreciate, Judy, you going through that. It was a good presentation. So thanks for explaining that to us. And with that, I'll make a motion to adopt resolution number 12809. That's all I have to say, right, City Attorney?
Second.
Yes, I'm getting a nod.
Okay, we have a motion, a second. I don't see any other hands up. Please record your vote. And unanimous, Ms. Durham. Thank you, unanimous. We will move on to 40A, presentation. Please come forward.
Could you please turn on the overhead?
It's, Greg Vistian. Thank you.
Mayor Ortega, members of the council, Greg Bestien here with Human Services. So just to give you kind of a quick overview, we applied for this grant just a little over a month ago, and it's through the Arizona Department of Housing. So it's for $940,000 that you can see. It was a quick turnaround. We got notification about 2 weeks ago. That's why this was an added item to your agenda. Just in a nutshell, there is $500,000 that we allocated in the proposal for room rental for the hotel, and then there's $400,000 for supportive services, case management, kind of wraparound, getting folks oriented to social determinants of health, that kind of thing. And then the $40,000 was for nutritional kind of food for them while they're in the program. So just to give you a little more information about what are the activities of the program, so I'll just kind of read through these. So we'll be serving, we think, over the next additional year, because this would allow us to continue the program for another year. So we'd be serving about another 120 adults, and that would include seniors and moms with kids, and a few dads, single dads with kids. And then what we're providing is emergency bedding, of course, for the families experiencing homelessness, or to prevent homelessness, probably more like. So we have 10 rooms that we'd be continuing to rent from the hotel, and 33% of those, or 3 rooms, would be per the precepts of the proposal or the grant. We have to serve folks from the zone that are being, those neighborhoods, the blocks that are being kind of shut down in Phoenix. The idea was that we would then take some of that overflow. So again, it's 3 of the 10 rooms, and we put in our proposal that we would serve specifically senior women, women with children, and families. That's the proposed folks that we would take referrals from. So we kept it very narrow in terms of who we would accept, because I think that we feel like that's probably some of the most marginalized of the population, women that are falling into homelessness. So that's the scope of what we're doing. And so the outcomes are improved health and well-being through better sleep, hygiene, security, and accessibility of services. So just in a nutshell, that's what the program is. We are, just to let you know that the Governor Hobbs, the Title 42 preparedness approach, we are meeting number 4 of her objective, and that's emergency shelter. And that will ensure migrants are sheltered while they are await transportation. So that's the piece of not only the zone, but also Title 42, according to Governor Hobbs. In another kind of piece to note is that some of the folks that we're going to be serving, the senior women and the moms with families, we have some tenant-based rental assistance vouchers that are going to be offered in September. And so we're going to be able to refer, this is just like our Housing Choice Voucher program, it'll run the same way. And so these moms, senior women, and families will be referred to those tenant-based rental assistance vouchers. So we're pretty excited about that. That's why I have Mary here from our housing office. You all know her very well. So with that, we would take any questions.
Councilwoman Whitehead?
Well, thank you, Mary and Greg. I am thrilled. Congratulations on the fast turnaround on the grant money. So we did this, was it the summer of 2020, 21, where we had the hotel? The success rate was pretty high at helping these people not only have housing in the hottest months of the year, but also getting them permanent housing. Do you have offhand the percent success rate we had there?
The success?
Yeah, of
Yes.
people that were housed afterwards permanently?
Yes, Mayor Ortega, members of the council, Councilwoman Whitehead. We have an 84% actually success rate, and that's for people that have participated in the program and actually gotten into housing from the program. Again, we do have a plan that we set up with each one of these participants. You can't just come in and be in the hotel. It's case managed. We want you to follow a plan, and the idea is within 30 days, that's where that 120 for the year. Within 30 days, we're going to get you transitioned into various types of housing, whether it's bridge housing, whether it's permanent supportive housing, whether it's an apartment. A lot of them, we've gotten rental assistance from Vista del Camino to provide that, getting them into the first month's rent and the security deposit and stuff like that. So we've got kind of several prongs that support these kind of programs. It's not just a one and done.
Yeah, and also we have had a pretty steep increase in the number of landlords that accept vouchers in Scottsdale. So I think that's worth noting. Mr. Koftel should be happy to hear about that. So just thank you. And, you know, there is, everybody knows this, there's a cost to taxpayers besides the, the responsibility we have, but there's a cost to allowing people to be homeless. It definitely is worth it to invest in helping people because it saves money too. So thank you.
Councilmember Graham?
Thank you, Mayor. Greg, thank you for your presentation. Where is the hotel going? Which hotel is it? Because you said, you said it's to reserve 10 rooms in a hotel. Is that right?
Mayor Ortega, members of the council, Councilman Graham, the location of the hotel is just off of Pima and Indian Bend. So because of kind of the confidentiality of the folks that we help assist, we don't just ordinarily publicize and especially for the graciousness of the hotel to give us the rooms, but it's located just right up there by Indian Bend and Pima.
And let me see here, I'll check my notes. It's 10 rooms we have over, my question, I'm sorry. None of the dollars are going to be going towards purchasing any real estate, is that correct? This is just to rent hotels?
That's correct.
Okay. And then you mentioned 3 of 10 of the rooms are from the zone in Phoenix. How do you know they're from the zone? How do you verify that?
So, Mayor Ortega, members of the council, Councilman Graham, we know that because we were provided with the number from the city of Phoenix. We know that it's roughly 750 folks that are in the various encampments in the blocks that are down near the Human Services campus that some of you might be familiar with. And so they gave us a number and said that this is the number that we're trying to effectively take off the street. They do not want them to go. They want them to get into some kind of shelter, whether it's bridge housing like this or whether it's some other type of shelter that the city of Phoenix is providing. But we do know that we will be in contact with the numbers that they're going to be referring. But again, we wanted to be specific about who we would serve, and that's women.
But I mean, like, do you check their ID, and do they communicate names with you? I mean, how do you feel certain that it's the person was from this area?
Yes. What they provide us with is there is a by names list, and so everyone that they're meeting with as they're getting them out of the encampment environment, that's entered into a database, and yes, confidentially, we have access to that information, and they will absolutely share that with us.
So all these members, community members, they carry ID. Is that what you're saying?
And those that don't have an ID, part of the program is to get them, because a lot of times they're stolen when they're on the street and that kind of thing. It's a very dangerous place, and so we work with them through the Arizona Department of Security and everything, to get them the kind of IDs that they need. And that can sometimes take a little while, especially if they originate a birth certificate or something from out of state, we have to get that. So that's what we work on with them when they are on our case managed plan.
What would you say if somebody from like McCormick Ranch said that it feels like we're absorbing Phoenix's mismanagement of, because the zone, would you agree the zone was kind of a mismanaged was mismanaged?
Mayor Ortega, members of the council, Councilman Graham, I would not comment to that.
Okay, so there were two questions. So about the first question, somebody who lives in McCormick Ranch, does it feel like we're absorbing how Phoenix mismanaged this? What could we say to that?
What I would tell them is that we know we have an 84% success rate. They're case managed, and we know exactly when we exit them from the program, we know exactly where they're going. So I think that that's part of the built-in safety mechanism.
Okay, and then you mentioned we're also going to be putting, you said you used the term migrants. Can you say a little more about that?
These folks come through the border legally. They come through the border. They are sent. There's several different sites. Some of them come to Tucson. Some of them come to Florence. Some come to the Phoenix area. And there are designated, even some church communities that actually serve those migrants. But this is very short term. The work that we do with those folks, or the nonprofit that we're going to contract with to do that work, they make sure that they get them transportation to various parts of the country where they have sponsors. And it's a very well-run system. Those churches get funding through ICE to do that kind of service, but we will be collaborating and making sure that they get on their way.
Do you look into their background or vet them as far as any criminal record or anything like that?
Mayor Ortega, members of the council, Councilman Graham. No, we do not. That is ICE. That's all work that's done when they come through the border, and when those folks are then sent to the various churches and other places, they've already been vetted at the border. So that's not something that we do on our end.
Okay. And then you also mentioned 84% success rate. Is that right?
That's correct.
And that's measured because they are they achieve some sort of housing situation, more permanent?
That's correct.
How long do you track that after? Is that something you just?
We don't currently have a mechanism where once we've exited them, we don't track them unless they still are being case managed at one of our other centers, which in some cases, like the seniors, they'll probably still be case managed at the senior center. So we can still track those individuals. But once they've moved on into apartments and they've moved out of the program, it's strictly a people power issue to try and keep track of where they are long term. We just don't have that ability.
Okay. All right, Greg, you answered my questions. Thanks for presenting to us.
Okay.
Mary, thank you.
Thank you all.
Councilwoman Caputi?
Just really quick, we all know that the homeless problem is very complex, and I think that we all get continual daily emails, what is the city doing to address this difficult problem? And this is a perfect example of something we are doing that makes a difference, that's measurable, that helps our community. So I'm actually glad that the item got pulled, because it is good for residents to see that we are doing positive things that have impact to help this problem. And again, it's only one of many things that we're doing to help solve, but I mean, great. It's great that we brought this forward and that we're doing positive things to help the problem. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, well, before making a motion, I would just mention that the acceptance of funds, whether they're from the county or through other jurisdictions. Item number 17 today, we accepted $105,000 from the Salt River Pima Maricopa community, Indian community, our neighbors, and all of those that was passed in our consent agenda. So we will make sure we get a thank you note to them, as I always do every year. Vice Mayor, if you have a comment, I'd like to go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have a short comment. I'd like to thank you, Greg, and send our thanks to all of the staff that you work with also, because I know they're very hardworking and do a wonderful job. And we need to help folks that are having a down luck day and week and month and year. And it's been a very tough time right now between illnesses, COVID, homelessness, all these different things that have been going on, many of them totally unforeseen before they struck us in the face. And so I would like to say thank you to all of you guys. You're doing a great job, and you're really helping people that need this help. I like to see that you're getting them on their feet again so that they can turn around and become more successful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, I move to adopt resolution number 12888, authorizing the contracts as shown in our agenda.
So moved.
We have motion and second. Any other discussion? Please record your vote. Mr. Graham?
Oh, there you go.
Okay, he voted no. So Graham voted no, otherwise it's 6 yes, the motion carries. Thank you very much. Next, we will go to item 41, fiscal year 2023-24 property tax levies. Sonia Andrews is our presenter.
Thank you,
Please
Mayor.
proceed.
Thank you, Council. We've got a quick little presentation. I'll wait for that to come up. Okay, there it is. All right, next slide. So the adoption of the property tax is a two-step process. On June 13th, we had the Truth in Taxation hearing and a public hearing and presentation of our proposed property tax rates. And tonight is the actual adoption of the property tax levies. Next slide. The proposed levy for our primary property tax is 0.515. That generates $39.3 million in the property tax levy for our general fund and our risk management fund. The secondary proposed property tax levy is 0.4664, generating $35.6 million for debt service on our GO bonds. So the combined property tax rate that we're proposing for fiscal year 23-24 is 0.9814 for a total of $74.9 million in property tax levy. Next slide. So even though our property tax rate proposed this year is an 8% increase from the current year, our property tax rates have actually decreased over the last 5 years. And this chart shows you that our combined property tax rate back in 2018-19 was actually $1.1021, and today it's less than $1 at 98.14. Next slide. And also I wanted to share that our property tax rate is the lowest in the valley. Now, even though each of these cities have different property values, and I get that, the different property values do matter here, but at the same time, our property tax rate is one of the lowest in the valley. It's only higher than Mesa because Mesa does not assess a primary property tax because they use utility revenues to fund public safety. So that's why they do not assess a primary property tax. Next slide. So this is my last slide, and before I go on to this slide, I know at the last Truth in Taxation hearing, Council asked for what are the senior assistance programs that are out there to assist low-income seniors with property tax assessments. There are actually 4 programs. One is the Senior Property Valuation Protection Program. It is eligible for seniors that are 65 and older. It has to be a primary residence. They have to have been in there for 2 years, and there's some income limitations, and the application is due to the county in September. There's also a Maricopa County Elderly Assistance Fund for Maricopa County residents that gives them up to $200 per year in assistance for property taxes. And there's also property tax exemption for widowed and disabled seniors that's available to assist with property tax as well. And so with that, we are asking council to adopt the ordinance number 4595, assessing the fiscal year 23-24 primary and secondary property tax levies and fixing the primary and secondary property tax rates. And I can answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
First, I see Councilmember Durham, then Councilwoman Whitehead.
Thank you, Mayor. I didn't say anything about this when it first came up on June 14th, but there have been some questions about why we're raising taxes in this atmosphere. I think, if I remember correctly, the increase is only 3.65%, and that's on the primary tax, which is well below the cost of inflation. We're a service provider, and so the city buys gas, water, construction materials, all sorts of other things that have been subject to inflation. And it's only fiscally responsible for us that we price our services. Well, we can't price our services below the cost of our materials and gas, everything. We suffer those price increases just like households do. And so it would be, it's a tough time right now for a lot of people, but it wouldn't be responsible for us to defer necessary increases, because then we'd just be in a bigger hole next year. So I think that this is a reasonable increase and is fiscally responsible for us to meet our obligations. So I'll be voting for it. Thank you.
Councilwoman Whitehead.
Thank you, Mayor, and I'll double down on what Councilman Durham just said. This city council has spent, 6 of us have spent well over a year working on the budget, and Councilman Graham is new to it, but he's spent plenty of time. The budget we approved it 7-0, so we unanimously approved it. So it makes no sense for anybody who voted for the budget to then vote to defund it. And this very minor tax of $7, an average of $7 a year, again, adds to our motto of world-class city with simply better services, and we can add to that and the lowest darn taxes in the valley. And for those of you who don't know, Mesa has an electric utility, so it's not their water utility funding their police, so it's something that they have that we don't have. But I just want to, again, remind everybody that what we put into this budget includes higher police pay, something we were lacking for 5+ years. We were losing our best police officers. We put in services to prevent homelessness. We've put in money to improve our parks and many of the other priorities. Again, as I pointed out in the last meeting, citizens came to us with petitions. I mean, this is a 250,000 person city. People came to us with petitions. And those petitions, they made sense. Pickleball courts, missing sidewalks, they're in the budget. Talk about a city that is directly working with its residents. So I just respectfully asked my colleagues to show some unity. And again, we all pitch in a little and we get a whole heck of a lot. And so I strongly support the budget and the funding mechanisms for the budget that we all approve. Thank you.
Councilmember Graham, Councilwoman Caputi.
Well, I guess we're going to get into a discussion a little bit about the property taxes. I wasn't planning to, but I suppose we can. The budget, to make a comment about not funding the budget, like a budget, nobody ever has liked everything about a budget. So you just come to an agreement on a budget, and that's an authorization. And then you can vote on separate things that relate to the budget. I reject the premise that we have a $2.5 billion authorization document, and we need $7. We need to get $7 more per person. I want to ask Sonia, that $7, Sonia, where does that number come from?
The $7 was calculated based on the median property value in Scottsdale, and it was calculated based on if we kept the exact same primary property tax rate that we're assessing today, which is 0.497, and for the median property value home, the difference of the proposed primary property tax of 0.515 and what we're assessing today would be $7. So if we wanted to translate that to something easier to understand, the increase in the primary property tax rate would be $1.80 per 100,000 of assessed value. So $1.80. So if you have a home that is valued at $1 million, your increase in the primary property taxes for the whole year would be $18.
But that's moving from one percentage to the next year, right? That's keeping that percentage.
That is assuming that if we kept the same rate that we're charging today, the 0.497, if we kept the same rate that we're charging today, and if you had a $1 million assessed value home, you would be paying $18 more.
Okay. And is it true that primary property taxes you can get lost in the weeds as far as percentage and values and all that, but the amount of check that someone writes for their property taxes for City of Scottsdale primary property taxes since FY18 has gone up 23%. Not to put you on the spot.
Mayor and Councilmember Grant, I'm not sure where you got the 23% from.
I got it from one of your emails. So I can point that out. I can recirculate that.
If the $18 equates to 23%, then that's what it is.
Okay, and the other thing is that, when you raise I want to, Scottsdale is a low tax state or a low tax city, and I want to keep it that way. So my question would be, can we defend every single dollar that we spend? All the popular stuff, the public safety, all the projects we're doing, well, that's not what we're talking about. It's about, can we defend every single dollar? Because we have project overruns. We shouldn't have done that. We hired this contractor and we stopped midway through the project and we changed contractors. Not every dollar is defensible that we spend. And in this environment of high inflationary pressures, residents could use a break for their property tax increases. So thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Councilwoman Caputi, then myself. Councilwoman Caputi.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to try to figure out how to say a couple comments that haven't already been said, because I think my colleagues have done a great job. Again, simply better service for a world-class community. That's what we deliver here in Scottsdale, and it's hard to believe that we're up here arguing about a handful of dollars. I think it is really important to put this in perspective, as has been done. We're talking about increasing the tax amount to an average homeowner in our city, approximately $7, again, in exchange for all of the things that we deliver to our citizens who expect the highest of services. And I think that we're doing an excellent job and that we should be proud of it rather than feeling defensive up here. And I am completely supportive of this move. So Mayor wanted to speak, and then I imagine we'll make a motion. Thank you.
Okay. Well, first of all, this is my 7th budget. As councilman, I worked on 4 right after 9/11 when a lot of things were uncertain. Today, this is our third as mayor and other council members as well. I think the longest tenure was Vice Mayor, Kathy Littlefield. And we follow a policy. And that policy has been exercised by all councils because the property tax obligation speaks directly to our fiduciary covenant or requirement to bondholders and speaks directly to our 3-star rating, our highest Moody's and Standard & Poor's ranking. So it's not something that we, in my opinion, and that we target, which would weaken our standing, because that is part of our very secure financial picture. The real question is, so we're staying within the bounds of, in fact, we're substantially lower than the maximum that's permitted. The other thing I want to point out is that property taxes apply to residential and commercial, and I know some people have spoken to the senior members or so forth, but actually the commercial properties pay property taxes, and that amounts to about 55% of the property tax that's collected by the city that supports, our wonderful businesses, that support services and products that support our economy with jobs, but also pay essentially the debt service on our general obligation bonds. So we're all in it together. It's not as though, and it is about the cost of a hamburger, okay, per year. In some places they pay $20 for a hamburger in that part of town, and that's probably what it would be if it was $1 million home, about $18. So, but it's very important to look at that. The other thing that I look at year to year is the delta. That is, how responsive is the council with scarce revenues and limited resources, and probably a wish list that's bigger than we can afford, but it is paired through every department and proposed as a budget. Now, at one point, we got a expenditure summary of 50 more FTEs, full-time employees. There apparently was an initial request of 162. It was paired to 50. Now, of those 50, 19, let's just say 20 of them, are related to a water fund or a designated transportation fund. In other words, they're billable for fees or fee structure to waste or water, and they're calculated and justified because of the needs of the water department. We could say, for instance, there's five new employees in the budget identified, and it's paid through the solid waste fee system. So the remaining, let's say, 30 of the 50 involve police officers for enforcing the short-term rental problem, and in enforcing workers with the fire department from our general fund allocations. And in some cases, they're half an employee or a tenth of an employee, so it's calculated pretty reasonably, and we all vetted this. But essentially, if you take the general fund expenditure for these 30 employees or 31 employees, it's about $3 million. And the list that we have actually is $6 million for 50 employees, but many of them are allocated through the waste and water fees and transportation tax. So we have gone through that process of analyzing each of these, and I'm not in favor of extracting those positions, which coincidentally come close to the $3 million. and saying, well, we'll find it somewhere or other, especially when it goes against the principles of our debt service payments and our allocations for, sorry about that, I thought I turned this thing off. So what I'm saying is that we are foundational in our decisions. Our decisions are reviewed by our treasurer, reviewed by every department, and in particular, if we quantify that with these new positions, and hopefully we can fill all of them, right? These are in our budget, and we expect to fill them. We want to have money to fill them. But they all have to do with the level of service that we expect, that businesses expect, that people in apartments expect, that the residents that own homes expect. And I don't want to look at cutting corners. I don't believe that we should shave off money, especially when it impacts our ability to, to keep true to our policy that we have, that these funds for the secondary property tax are allocated specifically for general obligation bonds, and cutting into that is not a wise decision. Also, it would be not just counterintuitive, but also it would be have a negative impact on our overall sustainability, financial sustainability. I will be supporting the budget as stated, Vice Mayor Littlefield, and then we have please go ahead, Vice Mayor Littlefield.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'd just like to echo some of what the mayor said. He's right on target. The property taxes come from not only personal property taxes, but commercial taxes also, property taxes. And they go to combine to give us, as Scottsdale residents, an extremely high quality of life. They're one of the lowest rates in the valley, if not the lowest. I don't know if there's one that might sneak in behind us, I don't know. But we are very, very careful in what we spend this money on. And primarily, it's quality of life. And we want to keep that quality of life special and unique and high for our citizens. Now, you know me, I've been up here for many years, and you know I don't like raising taxes. I would much prefer to be able to lower them, but I'm not willing to do that at the expense of safety for our residents. We need our police and we need our fire, and they need to be paid, and we need to have them here when they're needed. We need all of these kinds of things that most people don't think about, but they're ongoing. Our code enforcement officers that come when they're called to try to help solve some of the issues in neighborhoods and residential areas. All of the funding that we have to do as a city to keep our city at the highest level that we possibly can for our citizens. And this is what the taxes go for. We don't put them in a bank and say, oh, golly gee, we have millions of dollars here now. What fun. We're going, how can we use this money to better the quality of life and service that our citizens expect from us? And it takes money, folks. And as inflation hits and as things become more expensive, materials become more expensive, we need to meet that cost. And so I am going to support this. I think it is vetted and has been vetted by our treasurer and by every single councilwoman or man, council person sitting up here about 3 or 4 times. We've gone over it. I think our charter officers have gone over it and peeled it back and looked at it. And I think it's the best that can be done to keep that quality of life up for every person that lives here. And so I will be supporting it. I think it's the best thing to do for everyone concerned. Thank you.
Councilwoman Caputi, and then Graham.
Yep, I'm going to make a motion, but I just want to make one last quick comment. I just want to remind everyone that this rate that we're talking about today, this slightly increased rate, is still below the rate that we charged in 2018. And I know everyone here is very aware of what's happened in the world since 2018. inflation has been insane, and we are below the rate of 2018. So on that, I will make a motion to approve the fiscal year 2023-24 property tax levies.
Second.
And that was to adopt ordinance number 4590.
Yeah, and can I, and may I comment, Mayor?
Oh, yes. Continue. Councilmember Graham.
Thank you, Mayor. I didn't really prepare, I thought we kind of had the debate last meeting, but I put together some notes here as I was kind of listening to my colleagues. And these are thought out, thought through, thoughtful comments. I will say that it's a $2.5 billion budget, and we're talking about $3 million increase. So there's no cutting of major services. What this is about is we don't have to take every dollar from residents that we can. A $2.5 billion budget. Scottsdale is the epicenter for inflationary costs. Gas prices, you're paying, if you consider that in a sort of a sense, is a cost of living or even a tax increase, some might consider it, your gas is a lot more expensive. Inflation here is out of control, ripping Scottsdale and the Phoenix metro area. And it's true that the part of your property taxes that the city assesses is a small component. Other components, the county, and other areas, schools, those are going up too. So we don't have to add to that. We have a $2.5 billion budget. It's not a time to. This isn't a time to be absolutist about raising taxes, not raising taxes. This is a time just to look outside, to look at the economy and say, this just isn't a great time to do it right now. We don't have to do it at every opportunity. The rate, yes, the rate is going down. That's because your assessed values are going up. The check that you write for your property taxes on the primary that we control has been going up every single year since fiscal 18, and nobody can deny that. So I don't think it's a great time to do it, and other parts of your property taxes, in addition to this, are going to be hiked. You will be paying more in taxes. We're adding personnel to the budget. Do we have to add every single person to the budget? Can we make tougher decisions? We look around. You're tightening your belt. We even just heard from one of the commenters at the public comment that unhoused people are just a few $100 away from hitting the streets. So a few dollars can add up a lot to people. The last couple things I'll say is that we have grown as a population in our city, residents or non-residents, but the number of units and the number of people paying into the pool has grown by thousands. So we have added thousands of housing units, and we've been told every step of the way this pays for itself, it fills the public coffers, we have more money, we'll be better off, we'll be more prosperous. But here we are coming back to you and extracting more. And it's just a few bucks, but we don't have to add on to all the other increases that you're going to be paying. And the last thing I'll say is, in addition to this, we are going to be coming back and asking you to raise your sales tax next year. So it's something to take into consideration. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilwoman Whitehead.
Yeah, I would like to speak to my second and also kind of respond to some of Councilman Graham's remarks. And he brought up a good point about the $2.5 billion budget. So I want to give a little idea to the members of the public how a city budget works. We are not spending $2.5 billion. The way city budgets work is they're divided into different categories. We have the general fund, we have the capital budget. Those are the two primary portions. So the majority of the dollars in our budget, number one, they are to keep you safe, as in keep the roads from having potholes or fixing bridges or making sure that when you turn on the tap, the water comes out, or when you flush the toilet, it goes out. So the majority of the cost for running a city has to do with infrastructure. And so the majority of our budget is for that. But as well, the way a city budget is written, it includes the entire cost of a capital project. So for instance, it might take 5 years to add pumping capacity that we need to bring sewage up to our water treatment plant. That entire amount is in an annual budget, even though that's not going to be spent. So what does the primary property tax do? The primary property tax, it pays for the operations, the general fund. It basically pays for staff. I think Councilman Durham says we're a service organization. So the majority of our costs for the general fund is staff, and the majority of that is our police. And so that's really, so we fund different parts of the budget in a different way. But when we're trying to fund police or code enforcement officers or having, a parks staff, that's coming from this property tax. And I do want to mention about the tax too. So for 2 times in, 25 years, voters overwhelmingly tax themselves to buy and preserve 30,000 acres called the McDowell-Sonoran Preserve. So the first of those 2 taxes, which is a 2% tax, is expiring. And so what voters will have an opportunity to consider next year will be some sort of continuing some or all of that tax in order to upgrade and maintain our parks. So there's no sales tax. We cannot increase your sales taxes. Only you, the voters, can. And we have a committee that is looking at. The council has taken no action at all other than to appoint the committee to look at that. So I just wanted to give some clarification with that. So yeah, we will not be spending $2.5 billion this year. So that's it for my second.
Okay. Well, we are the jurisdiction of Scottsdale. And if someone wants less taxes, they can move to the county because that is where they are under the county's purview. In Scottsdale, we value 4 things: our beauty, keeping a city clean, keeping a city safe, and about our wellness. And those are the values that I don't equate with taxes. Taxes, as was said, is not just something we put in the bank and say, gee, we're fat and wealthy. We direct our revenues that are voted on by the people, whether they're sales tax or, in this case, the only subject tonight is property tax. The state of Arizona requires that every jurisdiction publicize, justify, hold public hearings on the revenues that they need to support their jurisdiction. That's what we're doing. It's a good thing. Please record your vote. Okay, the motion carries 6-1. Councilman Graham opposing. Next, we move to the next item on our agenda, which is item number 42, the administration of Municipal Streetlight Improvement District Property Tax Levy. And we will have a presentation.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. Again, this is a really quick presentation. Next slide. This is for the Street Light Improvement District property tax levy for the street light improvement districts. Again, it's also a 2-step process. On June 13th, we had a public hearing and presentation of all our street light improvement district property tax levies. Next slide. The total proposed levy is $494,979. And next slide. And so we're asking council to adopt resolution number 4596, assessing the fiscal year 23-24 Streetlight Improvement District property tax levy by districts in accordance with revised statutes and city charter.
Okay, I will appoint Councilman Durham.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to adopt, lost my place. I move to adopt ordinance number 4595.
96.
96.
4596, I'm sorry.
Sure.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please record your vote. That one is unanimous. Thank you. We're moving on to item number 43. We'll have a co-presentation. Brian Biesmar is standing by, as well as Gretchen Bengar. Please proceed, Gretchen. Thank you.
All right. Well, good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Gretchen Baumgartner. I'm the Water Policy Manager for the City of Scottsdale, Scottsdale Water. The next two agenda items are mine, and they have similarities, but I'm going to kind of separate them because they do have some differences. So this first one is a doozy. Intentionally created surface preservation agreement with the Central Arizona Water Conservation District and the Arizona Department of Water Resources. So before I kind of jump into what the actual agreement is, I want to give a little history of what ICS is. So in 2007, the 2007 interim guidelines were created. And this is the interim governance document that governs the triggers on Lake Mead, how we're triggered on shortage, the levels, how much is actually shorted, depending on what level Lake Mead is. Also, how you manage Lake Powell and Lake Mead conjunctively. Inside that governance document, there's also a number of resources available to the 7 basin states. And one of those is intentionally created surplus, ICS. So this is basically kind of a pseudo savings account in the lake. It was created to incentivize folks to conserve water based on a couple of principles and the ability to do some projects and earmark conserved water in the lake so they can use it at a different time. In 2019, the drought contingency plan overlaid the 2007 interim guidelines because we realized the system was at much dire need than what the 2007 interim guidelines could actually manage. With the 2019 DCP, what would happen inside the state of Arizona was that we were going to be asked to have greater cuts. Now, these greater cuts also apply to agriculture users that had access to Central Arizona Project water. They were asked to step off the precipice a little bit sooner than they anticipated. So the CWCD and Arizona Department of Water Resources created what's called a mitigation plan. And able to mitigate a junior priority, they had to mitigate a senior priority or NIA priority user. Scottsdale has a portion of its supply as what's NIA priority. And we signed a mitigation agreement with the state for that water. Basically, they'd give us water that we would have been cut using their ICS that they've been storing in the lake for several years. That takes us to 2023. I've been here in front of you, Mayor, Council, for the last couple of years, probably almost on a quarterly basis now, giving you updates on what's happening in the Colorado River, showcasing how we're trying to preserve our own rights, how we're trying to be good partners, how we're trying to build conservation programs inside our city. And so right now we have the ability to take wet water in lieu of being cut that NIA water. And the Department of Water Resources has asked to be able to preserve that ICS and take funds for it instead of wet water. So what does that actually mean? The fun, colorful schematic there at the bottom of that screen is just the mitigation scheme. The green portion through 2020 to the end of the interim guidelines. The green portion is ag mitigation, and the orange yellowish portion is NIA mitigation, and it ratchets down till you get to the end of the interim guideline period. So in 2023, where we sit, our NIA water can be, 75% of it can be mitigated with wet water, but that's ICS that the state holds. So the state's asking us to take money in lieu of that, so they can use that at a later date, should we get closer to the precipice that we know is potentially coming. So they have offered us $330 an acre foot in calendar year 23 to preserve almost 2,500 acre feet, and giving us $818,000-ish. The state and CAP would like us to consider this as a tool for the state to utilize at a later date and take funds for that. So staff is recommending to approve the contract among the state of Arizona, acting through the Department of Water Resource, the Central Arizona Water Conservation District, to preserve intentionally created surplus in calendar year 23. Do I have any questions?
Thank you. Yes, I just had a couple comments. So in 2021, as I recall, this council visited the first offer. I believe it was for 1,000 acre feet on a similar sort of transaction at, I think it was about $126 per acre foot 2 years ago. I'm just kind of trying to relate it, although, because then last year I thought there was another offer for about 4,000, or maybe it was this year for another 4,000 acre feet at another sum. Today, we're looking at a $330 per acre foot. Now, when I first took office, I thought it was under $1.20 or so at that time for CAP water. So this just gives the public, you must take note of this, and there's an escalation anticipated for next year, and then the following year it would cap out at $400, I believe, per acre foot. So that's the reality that all the CAP cities are dealing with because by trying to bank water and raise the level. I know nature helped, but the draw out is way excessive even for what fell with the snowfall. So I'm just saying this is consistent with our past actions as a council, and with that, let's go to Councilwoman Janik.
Thank you, Gretchen. Okay, so we aren't going to use the water. We're going to leave it behind. We're being compensated financially, and it's generous compensation. My question is, if we didn't have a water shortage, and if we did take that water, would we be banking it for future use? What would we be doing with that water that we are now not getting? Instead, we're getting money.
So whenever I give presentations about our water resources and how we manage our water resources, financial planning is a really great proxy. So you're right. We have a portion of our water resources portfolio that we use as a savings account. And we bank that in the ground, either up in our service area or around the Phoenix AMA, to be able to put in our long-term storage credit account to be able to pull at a later date. So this is water that we would have banked this year. Correct.
Okay. Next question. How long can we continue to do this before we have to begin to draw down our own water resources, the actual water?
So we have like any good desert city here in Arizona that includes the Valley and other desert cities in Arizona. Our water resource portfolio is built to be diverse and resilient and robust to be able to manage the future. And so this is just for calendar year 23. This does not necessarily give us, we're not at a disadvantage here. So it doesn't necessarily nick us very, very hard. I don't really have a time length exactly. We wouldn't be able to do this for 100 years, but these are kind of things that we do in consideration to build good stewardship as we go through the interim guideline periods.
Mm-hmm. And I'm in favor of it. Just an estimate, could we be doing this for 10 years before we'd have to draw down on our own actual water, or no idea?
So what you should know, and the next presentation will be quite similar to this. They're two very different agreements, and the next one is with the federal government, but it's very similar. Outside of all of these agreements, we still will be banking some water this year for future needs. So where we're standing, if we're using the financial proxy, we're not giving all of our savings account away this year.
Okay, thank you.
And let me ask Brian Biesmeyer to add to that answer from staff.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor and Gretchen. This portion that she's talking about right now is our NIA water. So it, in fact, this is a very small margin. And as Gretchen said, it's not going to really impact for direct use. And as we've stated previously, a lot of it depends on growth and how we grow and growing smarter. And we've said that our plans show that in a tier 3 shortage, our plans show that we're safe with our current consumption levels to 2035. And so any of these things right now are not in our immediate direct impact for what our customers are using.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Graham.
Thank you, Mayor. Gretchen, very good presentation. Thank you, Brian, for adding to that response. So basically, we're getting compensated not to take as much water, right? Do we ever get that water back in the future?
No, this is an annual basis.
No, but I mean, do we bank it and then at some point in a non-drought year we can recover it?
So this is giving water for this calendar year, it's giving water to this system.
But is there a ledger in the future, down the road, a future year where we?
So let's say next year we're miraculously not in drought.
Which is very unlikely, right?
So this water would basically January 1, the slate becomes kind of clean again, and we get our allocation depending on what actual shortage we're in. Let's say next year we're not in a shortage, and we'll find that out in August. This is ours next year again.
Okay, and then who cuts the check? Who writes us the check?
CAP.
CAP. Okay, and how much is it? How much do they pay us? $330.
The $330 per acre feet, so $880,000.
Okay, so you guys have done all the analysis. I mean, this is, at first, when you first think about it, it seems kind of risky, but I think you guys have really thought this through and think it's a good deal for us. Is that right?
Correct, yeah.
When do they make the payment?
So once you sign the agreement, I'll amend I'll amend our water order, and I believe the contract says within 30 days.
Pretty fast. And then I guess my last, this is more of an abstract question, but I think the goal of this is to protect the lake levels of Lake Mead. But are you concerned at all that higher lake levels in Lake Mead might temper the urgency of the drought condition? Because I think that visuals are powerful, and that visual of those extremely low lake levels gives people an emotional reaction. So are you concerned that this might reduce the urgency of the matter?
So with the concept of ICS, and again, this item and the next item are closely related, but since I'm just talking about ICS, the state has an obligation to take approximately 60,000 acre feet out of the lake and give it to NAA contractors. They've earmarked about 30,000 acre feet. So our 2,500 acre feet out of the 30,000 acre feet is not a large quantity of water. So as far as the ICS is concerned and the Lake Mead, it's not a large quantity of water.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of proverbial drop in the bucket.
Right.
I mean, there's how many water idioms are there, but it's if everybody did it, because, I mean, are our counterparts participating in this program? Do you know, like Phoenix and other municipalities?
Yes, there are several other municipalities in the state that are participating in this. One of the items when we're talking about ICS preservation, and then to the larger degree, the system conservation, which will be the next one, what this winter does, and also system conservation, is it buys us time. So when I mentioned 2007 interim guidelines, those are set to expire at the end of 26.
Okay.
And the Federal Registry just opened 2 weeks ago to start that negotiation process. So it gives us that time. We knew about 6 months ago we were standing at the precipice.
Yeah.
So this buys us some time to have those bigger, broader, harder conversations with the 7 basin states.
Are you aware of any municipalities that aren't taking this deal around us, or other water buyers?
Not everyone has access to NIA water, so to say which valley cities do or don't are participating in this, it all depends on their portfolio.
But you know, like Phoenix is and other places.
I don't have any knowledge of whether Phoenix is or not. I can get that for you, though.
Okay, I'd be interested to see kind of if you have access to participation from other municipalities, you know, what your counterparts are thinking, and if everybody's on the same page. So that would be all my questions for the time being, Mayor. Thank you, Gretchen.
Back to Brian Biesmeyer, and then I have Councilwoman Whitehead. Could you put the motion on go to the next slide, please?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council, and then to Councilman Graham's question. Gretchen, I think it's like 150 feet of water that the dam is down in total from
Since the year 2000.
Yes. So to put it in perspective, your question about will that make others less likely or concerned about the drought, you can still go after this is all said and done, and you're going to see like 140 feet after. So I don't think it takes away anybody's visual impact that we're in a drought and it's been a long drought.
So you're saying it's not going to make, sorry, Mr. Mayor, Brian, you're saying it's not going to actually raise the level a terrible amount?
It's not. It's raising, which is a good thing, but it's not, when it's all said and done, it's not going to take away from that scar, a big percentage of that scar.
Okay. Thank you for indulging that question. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, Councilwoman Whitehead.
Thank you, Mayor. I motion to adopt resolution number 12824 to authorize the intentionally created surplus preservation agreement. I should have had my glasses on. Thank you.
Good. I second, and we have a motion and a second. You know, I just want to stress that it takes at least 3 prongs: continued conservation. This is a stopgap measure, and of course, we rely on our world-class water department and our consultation to provide our, manage and control and deliver our water resources. Please record your vote. Okay, it's unanimous. Moving on to the next item, number 44, also water-related, and continue.
So this item is very similar to the last item. The last item was with the state. This agreement is with the federal government. So this is the System Conservation Implementation Agreement between the U.S. Bureau of Reclamations, the Central Arizona Water Conservation District, and Scottsdale. So compensated conservation agreements, somewhat similar to the one I just talked about. Conservation agreements are a tool that has actually been utilized by several organizations and entities, not just Arizona, but other basin states for the last couple years to find ways to continue to leave water in Lake Mead while we have those hard conversations. So this is one of those efforts. I was here last summer explaining to Mayor and Council about the conversation that the federal government and the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation had asked the basin states to do. And we were standing at a precipice watching the system basically fall. And the federal government asked the basin state to get together and find a way to conserve additional water outside of the 2007 interim guidelines to make sure that it doesn't fall to dire levels. It's taken the state quite the amount of time to come up with an actual an agreement. So the lower basin states, California, Nevada, Arizona, have come up with a plan to save 3 million acre feet up to the end of the interim guidelines in 2026 using system conservation funded through the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022. This table here is what Arizona, California, and Nevada have agreed to voluntarily leave in the lake in calendar year 23 to 26. None of these are mandatory reductions. These are all voluntary reductions by the different contractors and then subcontractors within those states. What we should know is these voluntary amounts are above and beyond what cuts we are incurring in each one of those years. You can see Arizona has found a number of entities to voluntarily leave water in the lake and get compensated for it for 375,000 acre feet on an annual basis, 23, 24, and 25, and then a little bit in 26, to be able to save up to 3 million acre feet. Now, the federal government originally asked for 2 to 4 million acre feet. The lower basin states were able to find 3. The entities thus far that have signed contracts with the federal government are on the screen. Peoria, Phoenix, asking you today to approve the agreement. Tucson, Glendale, Gilbert, Gila River Indian Community, Metropolitan Water District in Tucson, and Asarco. The vast lion's majority share of this is going to be the Gila River Indian Community, followed up by Tucson and Phoenix because they're the largest subcontractors in the state. Everyone has to gauge their own ability to find water and ways to utilize and leave water in the lake depending on what their portfolio is and what their current demands are. So not everyone is equal. Everyone's been having to evaluate what portion of their savings account they need to leave behind and keep them secure. What does that mean for Scottsdale? So internally, we've evaluated this agreement. We've had conversations with the federal government. We've evaluated how much we have for water, what our demands are, what we normally put in storage, and what kind of partner we can be with the federal government over the next 3 years. We've determined in 23, 7,000 acre feet, in 24, 6,000 acre feet, and in 25, 5,000 acre feet. Now, the federal government will give more money should you go into contract for longer periods of time. The $400 an acre foot was if you would go into an agreement for 3 years. It was kind of a bigger carrot. That equates to $7.2 million over the next 3 years to be paid out on an annual basis when you modify your water order for that year. Staff recommends approving contract of system conservation implementation agreement between the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, the Central Arizona Water Conservation District, to implement Lower Colorado conservation efficiency programs to conserve a portion of Scottsdale's CEP water in Lake Mead in exchange for compensation.
Thank you, Councilwoman Whitehead.
So these funds can be used. We have a number of infrastructure projects for instance, to recycle more water. So these funds will probably be put to use to do just that, I suppose. I guess this is a question for Mr. Biesmeyer.
Mayor, Councilwoman Whitehead, yes, so we're an enterprise operation, so our rates and fees are used and they'll cover our operating costs first, and then at the end of the year, with this as another revenue source, at the end of the year, subtracting out our operating costs, we have a bucket of money that we then use in our capital fund, and so this would just go into our capital funds for the next year.
Yeah, well, great, because that's great. We're funding using less water in the future, and that's wonderful, and still having a good quality of life. With that, I guess I will motion to adopt Resolution 12817, approving contract number 2023-061 COS for the System Conservation Implementation Agreement.
I will second that, and I will speak to that. You may have noticed when the true-up was done on our earlier today, there was an item of $15 million regarding drilling and pumping stations. That's part of the Scottsdale water facilities. And so it's one thing to store water, and it's another thing to be able to bring it back up. So essentially, we are increasing our capacity of recovering water. When we take water, CAP water, raw water, out of the canal, it's a wide canal, and they open the gates, and we can do that. But it's another thing to extract what we've stored in aquifers. And by the way, just to picture that, the storage that we have in the aquifers and what we have maybe approaching 200 and maybe 70,000 acre feet of stored water, that would be the equivalent if we had a storage tank 1 square mile by about 60 feet tall. Of course, we don't do that in Scottsdale. We don't have the towers holding water and storing water. We do it by restoring the aquifer. And of course, there are different aquifers that we replenish. So that is very good stewardship, guardianship. I see one more comment. We do have a motion and a second. Councilmember Graham.
Thank you, Mayor. I kind of have the same question, Gretchen, as far as our counterparts' participation in the program. And as I think about this more, is there any risk to Scottsdale, any exposure if the drought gets really bad?
So one of the reasons why we decided to kind of ratchet this down, even though it is 3 years, as obviously progress out from today, the unknowns become bigger. So 7,000 acre feet this year we can manage. As I mentioned the last item, Councilmember Janik, is we're not leaving all of our savings account in the lake. There are still some portions of our water resource portfolio that we are recharging this year and earning long-term storage credits. We're ratcheting that down over the next couple years and able to make sure that we're less risk averse in that way. So I would say with this particular agreement, no, the risk is relatively low to us.
You guys have done what you thought you needed to do to reduce the risk.
There is also a portion in the agreement should a shortage be drastic and almost draconian. There is a clause in the agreement that allows us to say in 2025, should we get cut in an unanticipated major cut, we do not necessarily have to be a party to this agreement.
Okay, so there
is an out.
There's
correct. In 24 and 25.
A circuit breaker, if you will, okay, very good. And then I think you talked about this, but can you kind of summarize again the plans with the money?
So as Executive Director Biesmeyer had said, is obviously as we go through a budget process, all of the money we have is for operating budget. Anything left over goes into capital, and we try to do as good a job as we can to get to that nice zero portion. So we do anticipate the majority of this water or this money being going over to capital.
Okay, it sounds like a slight risk, but a very managed risk. And so, Mayor, if nobody's seconded the motion, I will.
We did get a second. Thank you. This is a 4-party agreement. It's with Scottsdale. Well, first of all, you start at the top. It's at the Bureau of Reclamation, the number 1, right at the top. Then we have the Arizona Department of Water Resources. Mr. Pashatsky is the executive on that. Then we have the CAP board, and then ourselves. And we are all part, or I attend as representing Scottsdale, the AMWA, which is the Arizona Municipal Users Water Group. And I encourage everyone to look at that and see what the dire situation has been and continues to be, and how this group of 10 cities who rely on the CAP water, and that's what we're talking about here, what's the water that comes down the channel, how we cooperate, discuss, and fully vet, and we don't sugarcoat it. So it's pretty direct conversation. Okay, please record your vote. Thank you. Okay, we have unanimous. With that, we are going to move on. We have concluded the regular agenda items. And next, we will move on to public comment. Public comment is an opportunity for members of the public to come forward on any non-agendized item. I'm Hearing there is no request for public comment, therefore I will close the second session of public comment. We are going to go on to the opportunity for citizen petition. Citizen petition is an opportunity outlined in our charter that allows citizens to come forward, record something at the clerk, and then we could take action. There is none. Therefore, that item is closed. Next, we will move on to any, actually, at this point, I think we are concluded. Therefore, I will ask for a motion and a second to adjourn the City Council regular meeting.
Motion.
Second.
We have motion and a second. Please record your vote. Thank you. I want to point out that our council will move over to the executive conference room to continue our executive session meeting, which was recessed for this meeting. So we'll meet you inside as soon as possible. Thank you.